Hello and welcome back to LeEdFollow. Now, in my hunt for cars, I've flown across the pond to the USA and just touching down here in Nashville, Tennessee. Surprisingly, Nashville does have quite a motoring history. Marathon Motorworks, a car company that's long since gone the way of the dodo, was churning out cars around about the same time that Henry Ford was selling his Model T. Now, I'm not a fan of country and western music. However, the Country Music Hall of Fame Museum in downtown Nashville contains one of my favourite cars of all time. The Pontiac Trans Am from Smokey and the Bandit 2. This is very high up on the list of cars that I've always wanted to own. However, unfortunately, I know that will never happen. So with the weather now against us, we're taking a trip westward to a little place called Memphis because there's a chap there called Elvis Presley who apparently had quite a car collection of his own. Now, you're not allowed to take video inside Graceland. However, you can take as many photos as you like. So here's a few snips of his car collection. Now, I can't say that I am a big fan of the cars in the King's collection, unfortunately. However, it is good to see he had quite a varied taste and he had some proper bonkers things in his collection. So having seen all the motoring related things that Tennessee had to offer, it was time to head north over the state line into Kentucky for the main event. We're heading to Bowling Green, which is the home of the National Corvette Museum. And I do love a good Corvette. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, the National Corvette Museum in Kentucky. Now, where have I heard about that before? Well, you'd have probably seen it on the news or on Top Gear because back in 2014, there was a massive sinkhole that opened up underneath the middle of the museum and it swallowed up a load of cars.
Must have been a big one.
That was a big hole, and apparently 8 cars fell into it. There's a shot actually looking down. Look at that.
Oh, God, that's painful to see.
Damage was estimated at $37.
What?
But with all jokes aside, I'm actually really excited to be here. The National Corvette Museum was one of those big things on my bucket list that I always wanted to go and have a look around. And now I'm here. Now, my favourite Corvette of all time is this, the C6 Z06. It came with the LS7, which was a 7-litre V8, and it made over 500 horsepower from the factory. As soon as you walk through the door, you're greeted with a load of brand new C8 Corvettes, because these are actually competition winners who have come to pick up their cars. So through the ticket booth, get my wristband, and away we go. So for those of you at home who don't really know about the Corvette, let me give you a little bit of history before we go around the museum. The Corvette is Chevrolet's Halo sports car. It's got a fiberglass or composite body, depending on which one you go for, and it's not to be confused with their lower model called the Camaro. That's Chevrolet's pony car, which is the direct competitor for the Ford Mustang. Also a pony car. Ford don't really have anything that is like the Corvette. The closest car they've got to the Corvette is probably the Ford GT, but that's more of a hypercar, supercar. It's in a totally different price range. So, right now in 2023, we're currently on the 8th generation of Corvette. And the names of all these Corvette models, very simple. It's C for Corvette, followed by the generation. So we've had C1, C2, C3, etc., all the way up to C8, where we currently are now. Now, something to mention about the first 7 generations of Corvette is that they're all front-engine cars, very conventional like 99% of the cars on the road today. However, the engineers and designers at Chevrolet had always envisaged the Corvette to be a mid-engine car like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It's only now in the latest C8 generation of Corvette that they've finally been able to move the engine from the front to the middle where they always planned for it to be. The main benefit of doing this is that it improves the weight distribution, which in turn improves the handling, win-win. So anyway, back to the tour. As we went through the barriers, we were greeted by this first generation C1 Corvette from 1953. Love the styling on these, love everything about them, the colours, the interior, the white wall tyres. It's so cool. Even today, it looks really, really awesome. So next up, we've got some anniversary models. This is a 1978 C3 25th anniversary car. To me, this kind of looks like a Mark 1 RX-7, the FB. What do you think? And then next one is a 1988 35th anniversary C4. To me, this kind of looks like a Mark 3 Toyota Supra. And then lastly, we've got this 2003 C5 50th anniversary car. Now this looks a bit like an FD RX-7 to me. Let me know in the comments what you think. Maybe I'm reaching here, but I can kind of see a lot of the styling in the Japanese sports cars we like coming from the style of these Corvettes. So here we have a couple of C1s, and as you can see by the headlights, there were some subtle changes over the model years. In fact, the C1 Corvette was initially available with a straight 6 until the V8 models took over, and every Corvette since has had a V8. Now and again, they've even done a few special Corvettes with big block engines because, let's face it, there is no replacement for displacement. Now, all Corvettes have a body-on-frame chassis design. That means that all the mechanics are actually mounted to a chassis, and the body is a separate item that is lowered down onto it. These earlier Corvettes have very basic ladder frame style chassis, but the latest ones have aluminium chassis that are not that too dissimilar from something you'd find on a Lotus sports car. So, as we pass a display of C2 and C3 Corvettes in a typical time capsule setting, the tour now starts to leave behind the classic first 3 generations. We're now moving up to the more modern cars, but before we get there, we're passing through an exhibit of the racing history of the Corvette. Starting with their iconic Le Mans racer, the C5R. This featured a 7-litre race version of the LS1 V8, known as the LS1R. This then inspired Chevrolet to create a road-going version of the engine, known as the LS7, which is the engine powering my favourite Corvette mentioned earlier, the C6Z06. The exhibition covers the history of the Corvette in racing, from both privateers and also factory-backed teams. Circuit racers, top-speed dragsters, and even NASCARs, they're all represented here in the collection. From the C1 right up to the last front-engine generation, the C7. The tour now moves on into an area dedicated to a behind-the-scenes look at the design process. Car design ideas always start off as simple sketches straight out of the minds of the designers. These evolve over time, moving over into scale models. You can clearly see the various generations of road-going Corvette in these early mock-ups. Colour is very important to a car's design, and not every colour necessarily works on every shape of car. So a lot of time is spent choosing subtle colours to make sure every angle and curve is seen properly, but also to make sure the finished car is seen in the way the designer had originally intended. With management giving the design the green light, more detailed scale models made. These tend to get bigger during the design process until you have one-to-one scale models which look like the finished car. But it's not just the outside. Scale interior models are also created to design what the inside of the car will look like too. Sometimes these cars have already been approved to go straight into production, but it's common that the finished scale car may only go to an automotive show as a concept to demonstrate the direction a company is going with their styling and gauge the reaction from customers. Now we're making our way to the Skydome, which is the main display area of the museum. And to get there, we go through an area which talks about the sinkhole that swallowed up a number of cars. Unfortunately, nobody could have foresaw it happening. It was caused by the dissolving of the limestone in the ground, which caused pockets to open underneath the surface. Eventually, the weight of the building caused the top layer of the soil to collapse, and 8 one-of-a-kind cars fell in. And it's just really, really bad luck. Suffice to say, multiple scientific tests were done to confirm no further holes would be present. So the holes were filled with steel and concrete before it was confirmed safe and reopened to the general public. And unfortunately, Jeremy Clarkson was a little off the mark with his $37 damage bill. The 8 cars alone were valued at $1 million, let alone all the money it cost to recover the cars from the hole and then repair the building. Now we've finally arrived in the Skydome. Not only does this area contain a display of the latest Corvette models, but it also contains what are probably some of the greatest models in the Corvette's history. So here we have the latest 2023 model Corvette C8 Z06, which uses their latest LT6 engine. It's a 5.5 litre V8 making 670 horsepower. This makes it the most powerful naturally aspirated V8 production car ever. Sticking with the newest C8 model, we also have here the first factory right-hand drive Corvette. Historically, all Corvettes have always been left-hand drive only, but with the introduction of the new C8 model, we can now get Corvettes in right-hand drive markets like England, Japan and Australia, with the steering wheel over on the correct side finally. This part of the tour takes you back through the 8 generations one last time, with pristine cars representing the very best examples of the breed. There is way too much here to show you, unfortunately, and of course cars and displays that I've had to cut from this video to make sure it didn't go on forever. But if you're a big Corvette fan like I am, you can easily spend a whole day here. Definitely worth the visit. But before we leave this area, one more cool thing to mention is to check out the viewing hatch in the floor. To preserve the history of the Sinkhole event, they've installed a tube with a window, and standing over this you can look straight down into the remnants of the sinkhole. I think that's a really, really nice touch. So now, as we leave the Skydome, we head out via the final display, which actually isn't Corvettes at all. This is a custom car display showing a variety of different one-off machines. I'll be honest, the whole hot rod or rat rod scene isn't really my cup of tea. However, it's a nice addition to the tour, plus there is an unexpected hidden gem right at the end. Yes, that's right, it's the Batmobile from the Tim Burton and the Michael Keaton era of movies. Arguably the most beloved of all the Batmobiles. Unfortunately, I did my research and this is not one of the genuine movie cars. It's actually a replica, but that makes it no less epic to see in the flesh. And that's it. Of course, you exit via the gift shop, no surprise there. Also no surprise that it contains a Corvette, and also no surprise I couldn't help but buy something. So I'll leave the video there. Even if you're not a Corvette fan, hope you enjoyed watching it. If you are a Corvette fan, definitely check out this place if you can. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.